Revelation 2906. From the 2nd of October 1943. God's love and mercy is eternally for his creatures. God's love and mercy does not let any being fall, no matter how badly it has transgressed against his love, for it is his product, his creature, which emerged from him. Divine works are indestructible, thus imperishable, yet changeable in themselves insofar as the being's will determines its nature, but the will is not prevented by the original freedom from developing upwards or downwards. Consequently, the nature of the being can likewise change from the divine image into the opposite, that is, it can take on the nature of the one who was once God's most glorious creature and separated from him and thereby deprived himself of all perfection. Thus the essence is still the same but deficiently endowed with divine gifts which it had possessed before. It has become imperfect and thus similar to God's adversary. Nevertheless, it remains a divine creature which is never ever expelled from his love but constantly remains in God's care, even if it does not recognize or want to acknowledge it. God's goal is always and forever to lead the imperfect back to perfection, to cause it to change itself, even if eternities pass over it. For since the being created by God can never ever pass away, it is always and constantly given the opportunity for this change, because God's love and mercy does not want to leave it in the imperfect state, which is also a state of poverty and bondage and therefore can never make the being happy. God's love, however, wants to make everything that has emerged from it blissful. It wants it to be able to create and shape according to its own will which, however, if the being is perfect, is completely in line with divine will, and it wants the being to be thereby placed into a blissful state and to be able to enjoy the delights of God's eternal vision. Yet in its state of imperfection the being does not recognize God's love and does not comply with his will. It resists him and often remains in its state of imperfection for eternities. And yet it has to give up its resistance in fullest freedom of will. It has to change itself and cannot be changed by God's will. That is, reach perfection in the state of compulsion. And therefore God, in his love and mercy, seeks to influence the being such that it becomes soft and compliant. And he uses means which seem to question his love but are only determined by his love because they promise success, namely to bring about a slow change in the human being. And if the being does not give up its resistance even through such means, his love is always intent on its redemption and his wisdom finds new possibilities to achieve the being's change. He lets a new earth arise with more difficult living conditions, and he continually courts the love of the beings which want to refuse him. He is only concerned to carry out a continuous purification, to achieve an upward development of the beingness and to narrow the gap between himself and his living creations, for his love always and forever belongs to his living creations. If God seemingly withdraws from his creations, this is only a means to win them over for himself, because he wants to let them recognize their lack of strength and thereby induce them to seek contact with the original source of strength as powerless beings. For this is already the abandonment of resistance, it is already a conscious striving upwards, it is an activity of the will, the beginning of upward development. And God constantly seeks to change this will, that is to turn him, who has turned away from him, towards himself again. And his love, his mercy and patience will never ever cease. He will always and constantly woo the love of his living creations. He will use every means which can lead to success, and indeed all the more effectively the more resistant it is towards God. And thus the being, through its resistance, through its behavior towards God itself, determines the means and ways God uses to break its resistance, yet they are only ever evidence of his love and mercy, for he thereby only aims at the final reclamation of that which once apostatized from him because he wants to make it eternally happy. Amen.